Sharon.
Welcome, everyone, to the May 13th Eugene City Council meeting. Welcome to everyone here and everyone at home and all our special guests. The first, yep. Is it working? Yes. Okay. Everybody.
Our ninth caller.
Okay. So, about a year, Donna, was it a year ago? Donna Dubois over here had been chosen as a Teacher of the Year, and she had an opportunity to go to the Smithsonian, and she came back with this wonderful idea that she came and shared. And tonight I'm going to tell you the result of that, and we're going to recognize all these wonderful students and what they've accomplished. So it's my distinct pleasure to introduce and recognize the accomplishments of the students of Camas Ridge Community School and their teacher, Miss Donna Dubois, for the hard work and dedication they put into the Duck Print Historical Vignette Project. As they come forward, please join me in extending to them a warm welcome. And I'm going to call you by name and just come right up here. And if there's anybody that's not on the list that should be, just come on up, please. Okay? So here we go. Seska Linden Nussbaum, Isla Hackett, Simon Tidrick, Jesse McCann, Mackenzie Carrier, Olivia Phelps, Owen Torrance, Lillian Pichelle, and Evan Henderson. Does that do it, Donna? You come up too, please. So I'm going to come down.
Good job, guys. Yeah. Good job. You tripped. Wait for the mayor.
Yes. So these students who were in the 4th and 5th grades at the time selected and researched historical downtown sites such as the train station, post office, and Fifth Street Public Market, tracked down old photos, wrote a script, and blended the images with voice recordings that tell the story of our city. In the coming weeks, duck print signs containing quick response tags for smartphones that allow instant access to the historical information will be appearing at 20 downtown historical sites. This fun and creative project proved to be a great way for the students to learn about Eugene's history and to put technology to use in a way that benefits our entire community. I would like to present to Camas Ridge Elementary School a certificate in recognition of your outstanding contribution to the community and to the promotion of Eugene's living history of current and future generations. We are very proud of you.
All right.
Good job.
One of you did. Yep. And good. You got one on Ken Kesey statue. You got one on McDonald Theater. And this one on, again, the downtown train station. Oh, let's thank them one more time.
Just a little closer.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was fun, wasn't it?
Very exciting. And now,
So next comes the public forum. The public forum is an opportunity for individuals to speak to the City Council on any city-related issues, except for those items which have already been heard by a hearings official or are on tonight's agenda as a public hearing. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. When you come to the podium, please give your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward if known. The timer light indicates the time you have to speak. The red light indicates the end of 3 minutes. So I'm going to officially open that forum. And we have 14 people signed up. The first 4 are going to share with us advice on MUPTI. So we just had an earlier conversation about that. David Mendelblatt is first, followed by Charles Hollins. Right over there.
Well, that was a tough act to follow. I'm David Mandelblatt. I'm co-chair of the Downtown Neighborhood Association. I live at 996 Lincoln Street in downtown Eugene. MUPTI is a matter of considerable interest to downtown neighbors because the projects that it encourages are developed in our backyard. We feel the greatest daily impact from the projects. It helps attract people to our downtown as residents and as visitors. That's the good news and the bad news at the same time. Since I've been involved with DNA, which is several years now, there have been 2 major concerns that neighbors have expressed consistently: downtown development, public safety, over and over. We favor both. We want to start with yes, but then it has to be done the right way. MUPTI is a potentially valuable tool for promoting downtown development. We conditionally supported the Capstone project and will support the proposed Core Campus project, but only on the condition that the MUPTI tool is well used. I'm really troubled to see during the work session that other than the very welcome comments from Councilor Evans, public safety was never brought up. That's not acceptable. We're people, we live there. Visitors come down there. They must feel safe. So the key part is the concept of public benefit. What does the city gain from these developments? We believe that development should not only be good for business, but there should be something for all Eugene. Here's what DNA is interested in: pedestrian and bicycle safety, as well as automobile safety downtown. MUPTI can address those things. Let's encourage as much bicycle and pedestrian traffic as possible while discouraging unnecessary use of automobiles. MUPTI is a tool that could address that some. We would like to provide for a safe, direct bicycle pedestrian link between the university and downtown. Build a community that right now really doesn't exist as it should. Again, MUPTI can do that, at least in part, by supporting public benefit bike paths, traffic signals that will be needed certainly for Core Campus. We would like, as you did discuss, multiple family housing to promote diversity downtown. That's diversity of all sorts. We would like to see a building code or ordinance, and this is certainly related to safety for everybody, including residents in the buildings that are yet to be built. Building code or ordinance to require 24/7 permanent professional management.
Time's up. Time.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
right.
Charles Hollins is up next, followed by Sherry Schaefers. She's not here. Sherry Schaefers. Is she here?
Yeah.
Followed by Tony, it looks like Stirp.
Hello, my name is Sherry Schaefers, and my address is 252 West 7th Avenue in Eugene. As a steering committee member on the Downtown Neighborhood Association and a downtown business owner, I think the MUPTI is an important tool in building a stronger downtown. The recent resurgence of the downtown core is exciting. New living space, new retail, and new offices. We know that all 3 of these feed off of each other. As we get more residents, more restaurants come, and more retail is added. To date, the MUPTI has been used primarily by developers to build housing geared towards students. While these students are welcomed with open arms, maintaining a diverse and balanced population is important. As you review MUPTI criteria, consider the multi-family housing as a priority. We are a diverse neighborhood, and multiple family unit housing offers options for all people of all income levels and demographics. Expanding the pool of downtown residents also diversifies the type of business and retail, which is beneficial to all. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next up is Tony Starp. Starp, thank you. Followed by Martin Henner.
Hello, my name is Tony Sturp. I'm a downtown resident and business owner. Speaking again on behalf of the Downtown Neighborhood Association, we are concerned about the safety concerns, and we would like to get them put into the MUPTI in any way, shape, or form that we can. But specifically, the concept of pedestrian and bicycle travel should also be included as part of the public benefit requirement of the MUPTI. Impact analysis right now, the way we understand it, does not include any kind of pedestrian or bicycle impact analysis, merely bus and automobile traffic. We think this needs to change. There needs to be a focus on the ability to move around downtown between the campus, these developments, and our businesses. We also feel that it should be the developer's responsibility to cover these costs. The city in no way should be asking to pay for this, but it should be a part of the MUPTI requirement that developers do. And that's it. I'm not going to use the rest of my time.
Great, thank you. Martin Henner is next, followed by Gary Rondeau.
Good evening. I'm Martin Henner. I was part of the group that was originally attempting to build co-housing, a kind of Danish style of cooperative housing at the corner of 11th and Lincoln. We were going to be putting up 25 owner-occupied homes and on top of some commercial space. Unfortunately, our project stalled when our contractor, Roberts, went bankrupt, and then our bank, Liberty, went under. If MUPTI is reauthorized, we hope to be in the zone so that we can build what we think will be a senior co-housing project, again, owner-occupied. I've heard people talk about requirements for MUPTI projects, but I think that a differentiation needs to be made between rental projects where developers can be encouraged or required to put various kinds of amenities or income limitations in their projects, and owner-occupied projects. We tried very hard to make our project affordable to middle-income people, teachers, social workers. We even had a trainman for the Union Pacific Railroad who was going to live in our project. When you start requiring donations for low-income housing, extra setbacks for open space, income limitations, extra environmental considerations, we discovered that our project would become too expensive. It would be then only available to bankers and brokers and lawyers, and not diversified to middle-income people. So we want to encourage you to have basically consideration of different standards for rental developments and for owner-occupied developments to encourage more owner-occupied housing downtown. I sent all of you an email today, which I hope you received. I would say that when you do the zone, it doesn't make sense to have the MUPTI zone go down a street so that one side is MUPTI and one side is not.
Thank you. Gary Rondeau is next, followed by Chief Swiftfoot.
Hi, my name is Gary Rondeau. I live in River Road area of Eugene. And I'm here to first thank you all for putting in place your IPM policies and working to get neonicotinoids out of what's going on in Eugene. But because you're doing such a good job, I want to ask for more. So I think, the bees are in the news these days. And Eugene it was in the newspaper, Register Guard, just this week, of people saying that they don't see bees around, and it's true. So what I'm looking for is some help that you can do, and there's not a lot, because Oregon law pretty much says that the Oregon Department of Agriculture is the organization that says yes or no on pesticides in Oregon, and usually they just follow the EPA. But the EPA is doing nothing. They've said they are not going to do anything on the neonicotinoids until 2018 or 2019, and in the meantime, we're losing a lot of bees. So what's happening up in Washington State is that the county commissioners are asking the Washington State ODA to actually act and do something. And I think that's a reasonable position for the City Council to take as well, to actually write a letter to the Oregon Department of Agriculture and say, please, we have beekeepers in our city and we want them to do the right thing. And I have some bits of, I've got a copy of that letter from the Washington Thurston County Commissioners to their ODA, and I've got some of the research that they use to justify their action, which I'd be happy to fill you all in with. So, that's what I'm after, and we really need it here. We're suffering. So.
Thank you. Next is Chief Swiftfoot, followed by Michael Gannon.
My name is Rodney Lee Rentzman, Chief Swiftfoot,
So,
Tribal
just sit-
Alliance.
Just sit down, please. Yeah.
I'll start my time. I didn't come in here to advocate any kind of war. But every day it seems like we're fighting one on these streets. In Eugene, we have an exclusion order down there that trespasses us, citizens of this nation, from going downtown and practicing any kind of exchange with businesses. I can't even go to the Catholic Church. I'm not Catholic, but I should be able to pray where I need to. There are no latrines out here for us to use. We are criminalized by the system. I have a right.
Would you please sit down?
No.
Please.
I have a right, according to the United States of America, to pass freely upon these streets. So do my citizens. So do my constituents, my family, my friends, you folks, my people. But you guys put the question what our rights are to pass freely. You send out your boot stomping troopers out there to bring us down for trespass, for sitting on a public bench, because we spent 5 minutes there to rest. We don't have a place to rest. No place. No place to sleep. No place to take off our shoes and rub the blisters on our feet. My family walked the trail of 1,000 tears many years ago. I'm not here to demand my lands back. I want some damn respect for our people. You guys can do that. Please rescind the exclusion order. I have a year's ban down there that I can't go for a 20-block radius. I've been in this town for over 43 years off and on. I'm about 50 years old, kicking and stomping. But I ain't the only banshee out there. There's a lot of them with guns. I'm warning you now. These people are ready to stand up and dig their caches out. I've asked mine to cut them up. Most of them aren't. It's time to stand down. Open your eyes walk on these streets for a week, live off $5 a day or less, and be excluded and trespassed out of every business you go to because you've already spent your 75 cents on your cup. Susie, when did I stop being a citizen? When did I stop being a soldier? A dog soldier
Your time's
and
up.
a warrior.
Your
Thank
time's
you.
up.
I stand down.
Good, thank you. Michael Gannon is next, followed by Sabra Mycroft. Yep.
Hi, I'm Michael Gannon. I'd like to make just some comments about the MUPTI and hope that there would be some consideration of other aspects of it that I think are important to the community. Overall, I think that we should be, as a city, way tougher when we're giving away our community dollars. As far as I can tell, the MUPTI has been doling out money for a long time in Eugene at the expense of Lane Community College, at the expense of Lane County, at the expense of School District 4J, and we're not looking very closely at that. Those checks, essentially, that we're giving out because of the way the MUPTI works. But as a business person in Eugene for 25 years, I can tell you that in my business, and there's lots of little mom and pop printers that do what I do, they'd be happy to have checks coming into them from the city to subsidize worker education. They have various expenses for making a business work. And the presumption here is that the MUPTI is to give jobs to the community, but they're very short term. So I'm going to quickly go through my list of things that we need to look at here. We really are buying a lot of stuff that we're not expecting to. In the West University community, we've got intense traffic. The police department is not enforcing the new Oregon legislatures or the new Oregon law that the legislature passed, which gives pedestrians on the corners the right of way to cross the street. And if they were to start doing that, there's a huge amount of traffic flow through those MUPTI subsidized buildings that would cause automobile drivers in the community to yell help. So I want to think that we need to be looking at the long-term results. One of the things that that density is doing is completely upgraded the problem of student partying. We're not asking for quality construction that sees our community in terms of global warming sustainable over 1,000 years. In the green class where I work as a volunteer, I talk to kids about planting a tree that's going to last 600 to 800 years. We could be asking that about the developers.
Thank you. Sabra Mycroft is next, followed by Michael Kerrigan.
Hi, I'm Sabra Mycroft. I reside in Ward 7. Tonight I just want to say thank you. Thank you for making people welcome when you can. But most of all, thank you for continuing to listen to and work with people whom you personally dislike. And even to listen to people who you've heard say foolish things because the next thing coming out of their mouth may be the wisdom you need. Thank you very, very much. Today I got my glasses fixed for free. It was at the store that I bought them from, but I didn't tell them that. The gentleman who fixed my glasses leaped up to put a quarter in the parking meter for me before he fixed my glasses, and then asked me if I wanted a glasses cleaning kit and gave me one. And I realized that that is so much a common occurrence in this town. People going out of their way to be generous and making room for generosity in their small business. And I want to encourage you to make room for people to have reasons to be grateful. I know you guys are working really hard this week, and I'm very thankful for what you're about to do, even if it doesn't meet all my expectations. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Kerrigan is next, followed by Kimberly Gladen.
My name is Michael Kerrigan, a proud resident of Ward 7. I just want to thank you for the decision a few weeks back to modify the camping ban and identify some locations where people can safely sleep. It's a great process, but I think there still needs to be more public involvement in this process. I know the work session is coming up on Monday. I think you need to hear more from both the unhoused and advocates for the unhoused. For example, we have folks who are identifying some of the possible locations, and it'd be great to meet with the city staff prior to the work session and show you the locations at Alley Valkyrie and other advocates for the unhoused have found. So I think it'll make a better process if we can do that. I think the more public involvement that we have, the result is better. This issue is so important. So let's see if we can have some discussions prior to Monday and make this one of the very effective work session. And once again, thank you for the bold decisions you made a few weeks back, and look forward to working with you in the weeks and the months ahead to make this a really effective process that's going to move this community forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly Gladen is next, followed by Art Bowman.
Thank you. I'm Kimberly Gladen. I live downtown. I also work downtown and pretty much spend most of my time downtown. The downtown's really looking more and more beautiful every day. The fences are coming down, the construction's ending. We're seeing businesses opening, new restaurants, new places. We have a new theater soon to open. These are all jobs, lots of jobs that are badly needed. There aren't going to be a whole lot of, Nike's not going to put their store in Eugene or their company make tennis shoes here. It's going to be in Benton County, not even in Lane. Our only hope really of more jobs is to get our downtown going again and to get people to come back down here. And part of it is having them come down here and see things have changed, that we have a clean, safe environment for them to come into and enjoy. And for us who live down here, our quality of life depends on the downtown being a clean, safe environment. But it seems like people keep wanting to turn downtown into a war zone. Saturday morning, it kind of looked like a scene from Thunderdome. Kesey Square had been completely chalked with a lot of angry words. There was a lot of trash everywhere, and a lot of people pretty much being fairly disrespectful around downtown. When new people come down here, and that stayed until, Kesey Square was chalked till Monday morning and looked like crap. Part of it is when people come down here to see these new restaurants and to see how they've changed, and then they see that. It doesn't feel safe or clean. Nothing's really changed. There's just more businesses. That's all. More businesses to be revolving, opening and closing like it has been for the last couple of years. Part of the problem with the chalking is it just gets left there. The people who do it, and I get it, you want to get your message across, but the people who don't get it is you and you out in the neighborhoods. You should maybe chalk in front of your own houses first, in places where you live first. And the other thing is it gets left there until it rains for the most part. The May Day chalking from Occupy is still on the sidewalks, waiting for Mother Earth to wash it off into our rivers and streams. And gypsum pretty much in our rivers and streams poisons the fish. And this is why we have global warming. And I've talked to people. When it first started happening 2 summers ago, I put out a message for peace. Basically got told I was a psychopath for asking for peace, and they had a right to chalk it and to poison the earth for their cause. And it shows a disrespect for our downtown. Last summer, we had people all summer coming into Kesey Square every week to break the city's laws and ordinances, sit on planters and do little activities. That didn't help the businesses. It just showed disrespect for our downtown. And that kind of goes across, that people continue to disrespect the downtown. And if we're going to get going, we need to start respecting each other by respecting our downtown. Thank you.
Art Bowman is next, followed by James Chastain.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to say how impressed I was by the Living History project that was done by the elementary school. I think we all have a sense that we live in a unique place, and frankly, learning local history and even history of local buildings is something that helps foster that and is something that I think is important. But I'm here to talk about an ongoing thing that actually has me very puzzled. It seems consistently whenever there's a incident of concern, usually typically involving the police department, there's an internal affairs investigation, and then we hear that the 9 of you can't say anything about it because it would be counted as interfering with the personnel matter. Now, the last time this happened, we spent a couple of, I know several people spent a couple of weeks trying to look into this policy or law and try to find out exactly what the background is, how binding it is, and how it will affect you. I think this is important. I can understand your point of view. I can understand why you wouldn't want to feel compelled to comment on every potentially controversial issue. But I want to find out more about it in terms of what you are allowed to do, because as I've mentioned, you're the only 9 people who are actually elected by the people of the city of Eugene. You represent them. And there might be times when things happen and it might be your responsibility to speak out on issues as elected officials. So like I said, people have been trying to get more information on how this policy came about, what the consequences are, just basically what the details are, and we haven't had much luck so far. So if anybody, either one of you or the city manager, could maybe talk to us and explain exactly how it works, we'd be very grateful for it. Thank you.
James Chastain is next, followed by Joe Tyndall.
Hello, my name is James Chastain. I'm resident here of Eugene. And I would like to talk further about the homeless issues. I don't think it's all over yet, and I know it's not, and I know you all know it isn't. Excuse me, it's not working? Hello?
Back up a tad.
Okay,
We can
is it
hear
working?
you.
All right, anyway, that's another thing I was going to discuss. Some people are hard of hearing. You can't hear out there, people talking, and it's just really messed up. I hope you guys can actually fix this. It's one of my complaints. All right, the homeless issues, I know that you guys are trying to do what you can do and everything with the village and everything that's been set up. But I do believe that Eugene, Oregon needs its own homeless bill of rights, because you guys have experienced more in Eugene, Oregon than a lot of the rest of the world has. And I think that some understanding and your guys' knowledge of what you learned should be put together as a homeless bill of rights to protect the homeless here in Eugene. To harass homeless, terrorize, or to verbally abuse homeless people is a hate crime, whether you know it or not. It fits. And since we've been protesting over at the federal building, we've had people come by flipping us off, saying, get a job. I told them I got one. You didn't know that, did you? But anyway, they're stereotyping people, and we need protection. And I think a good way of protection is to have a local homeless bill of rights while we're still waiting on one from the state of Oregon. California's got one. I just found out on Facebook a while ago, Illinois pass the Homeless Bill of Rights. And it can be done everywhere. And this is one of the big issues in the country right now, and that's why you're seeing it happen. And they're wanting to get it done everywhere, and I think it's only fair. And once you do see it happen, it's going to be a big change. It's going to be for the good. It's going to be the Great Awakening. Thank you.
Joe Tyndall is next.
Good evening. Joe Tyndall. I had planned to be riding down the coast at this point, but Thursday night, $3,000 worth of tools were taken from my workshop. I'm not complaining. In the 60 years, I've been robbed only 9 times, but I am 99% certain the person who broke in lives in a house. Here's the tie-in. Every year, Eugene spends millions on police to deal with the homeless, yet there are more effective, lower-cost solutions. Implementing these would free up resources to work on real crime, the kind that actually has a victim. I went to the second gang symposium. Attendance was roughly half the number that came in January. And roughly half of these were young people not at the first session. 3/4 of those at the January symposium did not come back. Conservative faces were conspicuously absent. I have a theory. In January, Detective Harvey and Professor Balzac stated the police cannot solve the gang problem. Targeting gangs reinforces their belief the system is rigged against them. Sadly, conservatives tune out when confronted with evidence indicating their cherished myths about getting tough do not work. At the April DPSC meeting, the speaker from the mission stated, when stress in their life declines and they feel safe, drug addicts and alcoholics use less. Again, this argues against police and punishment. Homelessness, drug and alcohol addiction, and gangs are social and economic problems the police cannot solve. Give the homeless a place where they can legally exist 24 hours a day. Doing this mitigates every problem the DPSC committee has discussed. Today, they almost got to the solution. It was like that scene in The Empire Strikes Back when Luke starts raising his ship out of the bog. Then R2-D2 chirps, Luke loses concentration, and the X-Wing sinks back in. We are getting closer to some group standing in front of this council and saying it is time to do rational and cost-effective. It is good this council appears poised to modify the camping ban. On April 24th, I heard admission the problem is larger than indicated by the one-day count. This is good. Rescind the camping ban on select parcels, provide dumpsters and toilets, but if you make them haul their stuff in and out every day, demand clean and sober, or overmanage the site, they won't come. And finally, please, someone make a motion to create a committee on homelessness. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close the public forum and ask council if they have any comments. I don't see any. So thank you all very much for coming tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you for the input on the MUFTI. Thank you for the conversation about all the other issues that you brought forward tonight. We're going to move on now to the consent calendar. Council President?
I move to approve the items on the consent calendar.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It passes. Thank you. All right, we're on to the next item. This is the approval of the support position for Senate Bill 306A. Lisa Gardner. City Manager, do you want to say anything about that before we get started? Okay.
I'll just turn over to Lisa.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Senate Bill 306A, and actually it's 306. It will be 306A if it's adopted, but I just want to go over a few talking points that regarding this amendment and this bill we're asking you to support tonight. The bill was introduced initially. It was sort of a very blank bill, and then there were amendments introduced specific to carbon taxes. As recently as today, there's an amendment afoot, which you have in front of you, that is the sort of coalition negotiated amendment that is most likely to move forward. So I apologize for the unavailability of it, but it was really only published Friday, and then it's still being tweaked today. So it's sort of still out there being worked on. I want to talk about some of the points. This is a bill that eWeb supports, and this is an opportunity for us to partner with eWeb It's one that you've also heard about through the Sustainability Commission as one that makes sense, is consistent with our Climate, Energy, and Action Plan, as well as your policies on reducing the city's carbon footprint. A few of the points I want to make regarding this bill, as I mentioned, there was a -4 that's the last formal bill that's on the books. That one was looking not just at studying it, but actually imposing a specific tax. The one in front of you is strictly a study bill. It will study the impacts of a carbon tax in Oregon on businesses, consumers, and groups that may be uniquely affected, including low-income Oregonians, energy-intensive industries, and will also look at urban-rural impacts. The study report will be delivered to the 2014 legislature. It could help inform a 2015 proposed bill that's likely to look at how might we impose carbon pricing in Oregon. It's extremely likely that the legislature or the governor will want to do that. So this is an opportunity to find recommendations as to whether or not a carbon pricing mechanism makes sense for Oregon, what types of challenges and fairness issues exist, and how those could be mitigated. Without Senate Bill 306, there's very little data or research on these issues that would be available to inform the legislature. With the bill, the legislature will be able to make a more informed decision on whether or not to proceed and how to do it in the best interest of maintaining economic competitiveness and fairness to affected groups and areas. Though it's not clear how the study scope will assess regional impacts within Oregon, it could help inform the Eugene City Council as to what impact a carbon price would have locally. Given the relatively lower carbon footprint of Eugene due to the legacy of planning efforts from both the city and EWEB, our community could potentially be more economically competitive within Oregon once greenhouse gas emission externalities and pricing are internalized, give us a more opportunity of what the complete true cost would look like. The Oregon legislature has already shown a willingness to address greenhouse gases. There were a number of interested parties, including some of the private utilities, who were not comfortable with this being imposed, and they've been lobbying for the study. So this is, as I said, sort of a negotiated amendment. So I think with that, we can open up for questions. Babe Sullivan is here, and see what we can do.
Are there questions? See any questions? When you put,
I do have a question.
Okay.
Do we have any idea how much this feasibility study is going to cost the state?
I do not know the price of looking at the study. There's nothing yet that has been calculated.
And do we know when this will be completed and who it goes to?
It goes to the legislature. As the amendment is currently being negotiated, it would go to legislature for 2014, as well as obviously the governor's office.
All right, thank you. Mike's.
I've got Councilor Lincoln and then Councilor Clark.
So this is this bill, to paraphrase, basically just is a study bill. It sets up a task force that looks at this issue of a comprehensive carbon pricing mechanism within the state of Oregon for potential implementation later as far as 2015.
Exactly.
Right. And I guess the answer to your cost of having been on a governor's task force, all the people that go to them are volunteers, all the staff are already hired, and the only additional cost usually is the coffee and and if there's any consultants that are hired for this, but I'm not sure that they'll actually need to do that. There's a lot of horsepower within the state of Oregon and the agencies that would participate to be able to do that. So I think the cost would actually be quite minimal. That's all I have right now.
Okay. Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. With the state's budget being what it is and the difficulties in reconciling how much public employee retirement costs are spiking, it's not surprising to see them look for all manner of new taxes and fees, but at a time when we need the strength of our state's industry at its best, this is a monumentally horrible idea and would have, in my opinion, an adverse effect on Oregon's competitiveness, and certainly it would be a job killer, and I certainly hope they throw this idea out.
All right. Would you like to? Oh. Councilor Evans.
I'd have a little bit of a different take on it than Councilor Clark does. Given the issues that we're facing as a state as well as nationally with regard to financing our infrastructure, and the fact that the gas tax is not only declining but actually disappearing as a revenue source, I think it behooves us to study as many revenue options as we can to replace those revenues that will soon disappear from being effective at all in terms of supporting our infrastructure. And so if we don't have a replacement for the gas tax in Oregon, and this is one of the viable options, we will ultimately face a situation where our roads will fall into virtual total disrepair. You're going to see bridges falling into rivers and streams. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that we need to have that infrastructure investment. And so I wholeheartedly support, at the minimum, studying this. But I think we really need to look at some very different and provocative strategies to address our revenue issues in this area. And I'm hoping that if we do come to pass to talking about this at a further level, that we look at dedicating a significant portion of those revenues to infrastructure.
Thank you. You want to put this on the table?
Sure. I move to approve a support position for Senate Bill 306-A.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate.
I had one more comment.
You want to speak in?
Yeah.
Speak to the motion.
Do you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, I did.
You do. Go ahead.
Oh, I agree with Councilor Evans about the alternative that the gas tax. This might be one of the things that, since that's been declining, and transportation projects of all sorts, bike, ped, bus, and car have all been declining in funding. I think climate change is probably the biggest issue of our time, and we need to be out in front of it. I think Councilor Clark's comments reminded me of all the comments made about the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the tailpipe emissions from EPA, acid rain, Endangered Species Act. I could go on, that all of those would bring the demise of civilization as we know it. None of that came to be. I don't think this will either. The approach that's being taken here could be a revenue neutral approach. One more comment about the eWeb white paper that was put out that we got copies of. Well, I agree with their conclusion that we need to look at a comprehensive approach to carbon and look at the study. I disagree with their inferences that what we've done so far has been inefficient and ineffective. I think the renewable portfolio standard, the renewable energy credits, and feed-in tariffs, energy efficiency programs, even though they've gutted all of theirs recently, have been very effective and modeled throughout the country in reducing energy consumption, reducing people's bills that they pay, and also improving the environment and reducing greenhouse gases. And so instead of being inefficient and ineffective, I think they have been very effective and have been a model. It's Bill McKibben who said the solution to global warming isn't going to be a silver bullet. It's going to be more like silver buckshot, where we have a whole bunch of little silver bullets that add up to a big difference in combating global warming and climate change. So all those things, in addition to a potentially looking at a more comprehensive, potentially revenue neutral carbon tax, will be necessary in order to do that. I'll just point out, I think it was in yesterday's paper, Sunday's paper, or Saturday's paper, that the world's measure of greenhouse gases in parts per million, most of the scientific community says that 350 is what we need to be at, 350 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere to prevent climate change from having catastrophic impacts over the next 100 to 200 years, and we just surpassed 400. So we need to do more, not less, on this front, and be much more aggressive in dealing with this issue, which I think is the biggest issue of our time.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things I enjoy most about this particular council is the difference in the tone of discussions and the civility at the table. And with some minor exceptions, we don't feel the childish need to characterize one another's motivations and comments most of the time. And most of those times, I'm pretty happy.
Okay, I think we're ready.
One last comment. You know, I've been looking at this, and it looks to me that it's going to, if this study goes forward and if they come back and implement some of these, it's going to directly affect households and communities, jobs and wages, existing fees, state revenue, state income tax. And, you know, I have to agree with Councilor Clark. This is not the time to be tagging our citizens with more taxes. If we want more money in the state budget, let's take a big picture approach to it and come up with a better solution than piecemeal money from here and money from there and money from there, which basically comes out of your and my pocket. So, you know, although I like the idea, I just can't. I'm sorry, I can't support it for the fear that it might come back and start taking more money out of the citizens' pockets.
All right, then. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
No, excuse me. What am I doing? I was already looking for the door. I thought we were already there. Wow. All right.
All right, we'll try again.
That was not an affirmative vote, Mayor, just in case there was confusion.
In favor? That was almost good.
We try that again? Take 2.
In opposition?
That'd be
2. It passes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry, just lost my mind there. Thank you.
That was our comic relief for the evening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, comment's my default position.
You're doing a great job.
Metro Plan Boundary Adjustment Proposal, Springfield Side Work Session. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn it over to Carolyn and Alyssa here in just a moment. This is just a work session that we had planned several weeks ago that we had to postpone. The item during that time deserved more time, and we're just providing information today. We're not asking for any decisions at this time.
Thank you.
So this is a proposal that was first brought forward by Lane County about 2 years ago. It's a proposal to adjust the Metro Plan boundary on the Springfield side of I-5. About 2 months ago now, the Springfield City Council voted unanimously to approve that adjustment. And I'd like to introduce that we have today in the audience a couple staff from the City of Springfield in case there are any questions for them. We have Greg Mott, who's the current Development Division Manager, and Len Goodwin, who is the Development and Public Works Director. So,
would you mind getting a little closer to the microphone, please?
Oh, really? I feel like I'm...
In other words,
Pull the mic toward you.
It's very loud. So Alyssa has a PowerPoint presentation to remind us all about this proposal and the process that is underway. And it'll just take a second to bring it up on the screen. Do you have anything to add? Okay. It's almost ready. Here we go. So with that, we'll turn it over to Alyssa Hanson.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having us back and letting us stay this time around. I know you've had some pressing issues, so we're glad that you're able to fit this one in. As Carolyn said, tonight's work session is on a proposed boundary adjustment to the Metropolitan Plan on the Springfield side of I-5. And what I want to do is just provide you an update. It's been over a year since the city participated in the joint elected officials public hearing along with Springfield and the Lane County Board. You've dealt with a lot of matters between that time, and in addition, we have 2 new city councilors. So I want to make sure that you all have the same information and that you have the information you need to make an informed decision on this matter. I'm going to cover just a couple of topics, just give you a brief overview of what the Metro Plan is, and then kind of dive into the details of what this current proposal is on the Springfield side, and then just touch very lightly on a potential future proposal on the Eugene side. So starting with an overview of the Metro Plan, as you probably know, this is our region's comprehensive land use plan. So it covers the urban growth boundaries of Eugene, Springfield, and then some portions of Lane County. All jurisdictions in Oregon are required to have a comprehensive plan for land use matters. We're not required to have a regional plan, but we're not prohibited from having one either. So the Metro Plan it's a broad land use policy document. It provides broad policy direction, and really we kind of see it as a blueprint for how we want to be as a community, whether it's through development, land allocation, natural resource protection, public facilities, transportation, and of course it relies heavily on coordination amongst the involved jurisdictions. In fact, it is a unique situation that we share this comprehensive plan with another city as well as with the county. But our area actually has a long history of regional planning. Starting in 1958, we had a shared plan amongst the cities that actually reached all the way to Junction City and Coburg. That was followed up in 1972 with what was called the 1990 plan, which is really seen as the precursor to the current Metro Plan. And this all happened before there was the creation of the statewide planning system that mandated comprehensive planning. So the current Metro Plan was adopted and acknowledged by the state in the early 1980s. And of course, times have changed, and it has undergone several major updates since that time. One of the more recent changes that I'm sure you're familiar with on a state level is more local level, is the passing of House Bill 3337 that requires us to separate urban growth boundaries so that Eugene and Springfield each have our separate urban growth boundaries and our separate residential lands inventories. Now we know as a result of the establishment of separate urban growth boundaries, there are going to need to be some changes to the Metro Plan. Just, it's built on the concept of a shared urban growth boundary. So we know that the Metro Plan boundary will eventually take a different role, and these conversations are underway with Lane County and Springfield and the city. So just moving on, this map is in your packet. This is just for some context about what the Metro Plan covers. So all of the areas up here that have a different shaded color, those all fall within the Metro Plan boundary. The darkest line represents the urban growth boundary. So you can see, obviously, that there are portions of the Metro Plan that go beyond, thank you, Carolyn, that go beyond the urban growth boundary. And the colors represent the land use designations or the planned uses within those areas. So inside the urban growth boundary, they're they are urban uses. Outside, they're predominantly rural uses. So this map shows the areas that are that are part of this proposal, or Lane County's proposal, and what they're asking is to adjust the Metro Plan boundary to remove these lands from the Metro Plan, to shrink the Metro Plan boundary and make it coterminous with the urban growth boundary. And they've initiated this request because they want to have full jurisdictional autonomy for land use matters outside the urban growth boundaries of Eugene and Springfield. So currently they do regulate zoning and other development regulations and building permits in these areas. But when it comes to changes to the Metro Plan boundary, then the cities also are part of the decision makers. Lane County is approaching this in 2 phases. The first phase, which is really the application under consideration, is the east side of I-5, so Springfield. And we anticipate that there will be a future phase on the west side, or the Eugene side. So moving closer to what the current proposal is, so those are the lands that would be affected. That's about 8,100 acres outside of Springfield's urban growth boundary. And I want to cover what would change as a result of this if it is approved, and what wouldn't change. So I'll start with the what wouldn't change. And that would be the land use designations. You remember on that colored map, the map with the different colors, it showed, what it shows is what lands are agricultural, what lands are planned for forests, sand and gravel, parks and open space. Those would not change, because what would happen is that these lands would move from the Metro Plan boundaries into Lane County's Rural Comprehensive Plan, and they would retain those land use designations. So basically the uses would more or less remain the same as what they are now. In terms of what would change, that has more to do with, it has everything to do with decision-making authority. So what Lane County would, they would gain full jurisdiction over these areas, and the city of Springfield would no longer be a decision maker in any Metro Plan amendment for this area. So currently there's shared decision making. So as an example, if somebody had agricultural land and they thought it was a prime site for sand and gravel, then currently it would require Lane County and Springfield to both approve that for it to occur. Under the proposal, City of Springfield would not have that role anymore. They would be they would participate like any other citizen, and they would be able to weigh in with public testimony, but would no longer be a decision maker. Maybe a less direct impact is regarding a provision in the Metro Plan that's called regional impact, and what it would allow on the Springfield side is that it allows the City of Eugene the ability to participate in the Metro Plan decision within that shaded area if it can be demonstrated that there's an impact on our city services. So if the change was going to affect the city's water, stormwater, wastewater, or transportation, then we could elect to weigh in as decision makers. Or we, I guess, you could elect to weigh in as decision makers. Or if the amendment required a subsequent amendment or an amendment to our transportation plan or our public facilities plan to serve the property with urban levels of service. In either of those cases, the City of Eugene could elect to weigh in on matters within the shaded area. I will note, however, that we can find no record that either city has invoked this regional impact provision, but I just wanted to let you know it was out there. So in either case, if this boundary does change, the city would still be able to participate as any other citizen could. So this just shows the Metro Plan boundary, the existing boundary on the left and the proposed boundary on the right. And as I mentioned, these lands would be transferred into Lane County's Rural Comprehensive Plan and retain those same designations. All right, as Carolyn mentioned, this was initiated, over 2 years ago. So I just kind of want to walk you through the timelines to familiarize yourself or refamiliarize you with those. So once again, this was initiated by Lane County in February of 2011. Later that summer, the Joint Planning Commissions of Springfield, Eugene, and Lane County held a public hearing and a continued public hearing, and then they met in the fall in October for joint deliberations in action. Your Planning Commission voted to recommend approval on a 3-2 vote. Following the Joint Planning Commission's deliberation and action, the joint elected officials, Springfield, Eugene, and the Lane County Board held a public hearing in March of 2012. And then I'm sure you're all noticing that there is a year gap up there. And during that time, the City of Springfield, Lane County, and the Springfield Utility Board were working together to reach an acceptable solution to ensure that Springfield's drinking water sources that fall within this area would remain adequately protected. And really the outcome of these discussions was an intergovernmental agreement. And as Carolyn mentioned, the Springfield Council actually just this past March voted 6-0 to approve, not only to approve the proposed adjustment, but to approve the provisions of the IGA. And actually, it would actually allow them to have decision-making authority on issues related to drinking water protection. Your packet includes a copy of the IGA. I've set at your seat a copy of the map that is referenced in the IGA, and it shows what areas would actually where Springfield would retain that decision-making authority. So depending on the outcome of tonight, we're hoping that we can schedule City Council action by the end of the month, and then Lane County is tentatively, although they've tentatively approved the proposal, they're waiting until those cities have acted before they make their final decision, and they're scheduled for June 14th. And all three jurisdictions have to approve it for it to become effective. All right, so this is probably the dullest looking slide in my presentation, but probably the one that's most important to you guys. And really, it's at the heart of the matter. And this is, these are the things that we've heard during the process and just things that I think that are important for you to consider in your decision making. The first is about Springfield's drinking water sources and the protection of those. As I mentioned, That's been resolved to the satisfaction of Springfield, Lane County, and Springfield Utility Board through the IGA. The remaining 4 of these topics are really more philosophical in nature and kind of things that you might just want to give some thought to. So the second bullet is local decision-making authority and jurisdictional representation. So some of the things we've heard is that the cities would lose some decision-making authority in these areas, and concern was raised about that. On the other hand, we also heard that this would reduce layers of government. Currently, within those shaded areas, although the people there vote for the Board of Commissioners, if there's a land use matter related to the Metro Plan, then the city of Springfield actually weighs in and can be, as a decision maker, can determine that use wouldn't go forward. The third bullet on regional planning and collaborative decision making. As I've mentioned, the region has a long history of regional planning and collaboration. And a concern was raised that by reducing these boundaries, that it would erode the relationships that the cities and the county have established and maintained. On the other hand, we have heard from our partners, as well as from our Planning Commission, that there are different mechanisms for regional planning, and maybe it's time to revisit what a new mechanism could be. The Metro Plan has been around for a long time, and it's time to do something different. In terms of the fourth bullet, the comprehensive approach to changing the Metro Plan, we did hear that it was preferable that this all happened in one phase. So rather than breaking it up into 2 phases, the Springfield side and the Eugene side, that it should be put on hold and it should wait until both cities have established urban growth boundaries, and then it can happen comprehensively. But as you know, the city of Springfield has already established their urban growth boundary, at least for residential purposes. We still have a little bit of work, although we're working hard on that. So there's already a bit of a piecemeal when it comes to the approach on that. And then finally, on intergovernmental relationships and partnerships, this is really the issue of how we work together with our partners over time and the relationships we build and maintain. So as I said, these issues really are impactful to the current proposal, but there are also things to think about as we move ahead, and we anticipate that Lane County will be coming forward at some time with a proposal to amend the metro boundary on the Eugene side. Now, the scope and timing of that have not been established, and it requires a separate public process. And we anticipate that the outcome of Envision Eugene, including the location of our urban growth boundary, are really going to be important factors in that discussion. Plus, we do have some unique considerations here in Eugene. The City of Eugene Airport happens to fall within that shaded area. And although we're exploring including that in the urban growth boundary, we don't know how that discussion will end. Lane Community College also falls within this gray area, which is quite a regional facility. And then there's quite a bit of city-owned parkland, including Spencer Butte, that falls within this joint decision-making area. And I will say, Lane County has not initiated that proposal, and it hasn't been on our radar because we've been working so closely with Envision Eugene. But when that time comes, we will definitely be sure to involve you all in that conversation. And then finally, just real quick, next steps. So the current proposal, which only applies on the Springfield side, depending on the outcome of tonight, we'll be scheduling action for the end of the month. And then regarding the Eugene side, there's no timeline or scope established. And that's it.
Remind me, please, this was originated because of a specific incident involving a house, or was there an incident that precipitated Lane County wanting to do this?
It relates to, there was those 5 jurisdictional issues that Lane County raised. I'm going to think it was like 2008 or 2009, and it was one of those. I don't know it was specifically raised. Yeah. I mean, there is a property, I believe the property owner is here, just outside of Springfield, where because it's within the Metro Plan boundary, they cannot divide the property. It is rural
what I was
residential
recalling.
property, but there's a 5-acre minimum inside the Metro Plan boundary. Outside the Metro Plan boundary, it's not as high of a minimum, and if they were outside the boundary, they could be able to divide the property. That is not the reason that Lane County initiated this, but it definitely...
It's a factor.
Yeah, it is a factor.
Okay, because that sort of felt like a hammer to hit a big hammer for a small.
It was just a part of it.
But just part of it. It would be helpful to me if a representative from Springfield would be willing to come and answer questions. I just want to understand the logic for why you would think it was in your interest, why your council thought it was in Springfield's interest. And I'd just like to hear.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Len Goodwin. I'm Director of Development and Public Works, City of Springfield. I think the fundamental reason that the Council has advanced for ultimately supporting the proposal of Lane County is that it simplifies the role of regional planning from the perspective of Springfield. As Alyssa has said, there has yet to be a case where regional impact has become an issue which has created complexity or complications for either of the two cities to move forward with proposals to affect their own growth and future. But it's always a concern that at some point all of us may get into somewhat of a knot because we do have different perspectives, we do have different approaches, and anything that makes it possible to simplify that and reduce the occasions where there can be that complexity is a positive, as long as from Springfield's perspective, we can assure that the essential interests of the city and its citizens are protected. That's why we ultimately agreed to move forward with the intergovernmental agreement, which is sort of like a dual powers agreement in a way, to assure that the city retains the ability to protect those things which are essential interests of the citizens, but does not have to involve itself in other matters where our interests are more vague and less well defined.
So I know the water was part of the concern, and you settled that. Does your intergovernmental agreement leave you room for other issues that you might discover out there in the future?
Mayor and Council, it is fairly closely limited to the water issue. After an extensive amount of study at the staff level, we recommended to Council that the water issue was the one critical thing that concerned us. Clearly, Springfield, like Eugene, has had a long history of working with the county when there are things of mutual concern and interest. I think our council ultimately felt comfortable that should something unknown arise that we had not contemplated, we would be able to work with Lane County. Obviously, as Alyssa and Carolyn have said, we can participate in any land use action that the county undertakes, as could any other property owner. But I think our belief is that the special relationship that exists between the county and each of the cities is one that we can rely on should there be other interests that we are not aware of at the moment.
Just one more question, and that is in terms of being part of the discussion over future issues. It doesn't mean you have any power over those issues other than participating in the discussion and believing that with your partnership that will all land you in a good place.
Mayor Pierce, you are correct. This does eliminate joint decisional authority with respect ultimately to everything except the inventory of water resources or any change to that inventory, and any land use action which would affect the viability of the resource protected in that inventory.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering those questions. Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to say thank you to both gentlemen from Springfield for being here tonight and waiting through our entire meeting to be a resource for us tonight. Appreciate that very much. So you mentioned that the real issue here was around decision making, but there's a couple of other things that are kind of involved here. You kind of touched on one of them with regard to the very different standards for development of parcel or separation of parcels that are involved here. Could you elaborate on that just a little bit more, the different standards for
Well, I think what
once it's coterminous?
Okay, so and there's about a handful of properties, maybe 6 or 8 properties that this would affect.
In Springfield?
Outside of Springfield.
Okay.
So between the Springfield's urban growth boundary and the current Metro Plan boundary, there's 6 to 8 properties that are.
How about Eugene?
I don't have the answer on the Eugene side.
Anybody? That leads me to another kind of point here, and for me, this question has always been really pretty simple from a 30,000-foot level, because you showed the public lands that are within the scope of the Eugene side, and I know we're just talking about Springfield tonight, but the airport and the LCC and so forth, but there are a good many privately owned lands, and there are residents in some of those spaces. Now, the interesting thing for me is that we're asserting some manner of decision-making and jurisdiction over people that have no capacity to vote for us, and that doesn't seem right to me. Just as much as I wouldn't want, folks in Oak Ridge making decisions about our downtown just because they imagine they have an interest in what occurs there. So I'm uncomfortable with the nature of that in the first place, and would rather see it change on both sides of the highway. But the other question I would have, too, is what's going to be the effect if it goes through all levels to create coterminous lines on the next UGB expansion in either Eugene or Springfield, when you have a process by which you have a series of type of lands that you must consider for first look, second look? You can't use this, type 1, has to be off the board, so forth. How does this change affect future UGB expansions? Because my understanding is those lands are right now designated for future growth, right?
Only a handful of those lands are actually designated for future growth.
Okay.
The bulk of them are actually designated for farm and forest, which is actually our very last priority when considering a UGB expansion. And so those land use designations would remain. So once they come out, if they were to come out of the Metro Plan boundary and move into Lane County's Rural Comprehensive Plan, there are no changes proposed to their land use designations.
And
so those that are residential now would stay residential, and those would be a first priority for expansion.
So it wouldn't affect anybody's ability to develop those at some future point with regard to our UGB or our expansion into those areas. It's technically wouldn't change anything, and it's still just as least likely to happen.
Right. I mean, from personal experience looking at the UGB expansion, we don't look at those lands. I mean, the Metro Plan boundary doesn't actually make a difference when looking at the land use designations.
So
they're
for
rural
those who
residential in the Metro Plan, they're rural residential in the comprehensive plan. They're
right.
looked at the same.
What I'm trying to get to is for those who would make the argument that somehow ceding those solely to county jurisdiction would make them more susceptible to development just simply isn't true. Isn't that correct?
It wouldn't make them, be any more, it wouldn't change how we would view them in terms of an urban growth boundary expansion.
Thank you.
Councillor Pryor.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation, and thanks for coming. I remember when this issue came up, and my first reaction when I heard it was kind of is the county doing a power play? Are they trying to take over? And we did talk about the water protection issue, because that was also a significant one for me, knowing how Springfield is so dependent on that. So now that it's a year and a half later, I'm really gratified at the progress that's been made in terms of resolving a lot of the issues. Springfield's UGB is set, so that provides a certain degree of clarity in terms of what you foresee as where you want to go and what you foresee as areas that you don't need to have that multi-jurisdiction, because I agree with you. Clarity and certainty is very important, and this really does allow the opportunity for that. We'll have our conversations about the Eugene side, and they'll be our conversations, and that's fine. But I don't see that having anything to do with what you have arrived at, which to me looks perfectly reasonable. The wellhead protection was the biggest thing for me. You've resolved that. I'm amazed. I'm really pleased, and that gives me confidence that we can also resolve any issues we may have around airports or other kinds of property. If you have the ability to do that, we may have the ability to do it as well. So I'm encouraged by that. And probably the last thing I would say is that for me, the final reason why I wouldn't even dream of wanting to I don't want to use the word meddle. That sounds too overbearing, but I am encouraged by your 6-0 confidence in this proposal. And a 6-0 confidence is something that I take very seriously, and therefore I would absolutely support the fact that your city council feels this has been resolved sufficiently for you to be supportive. I can actually see, because of the nature of the lands that you're moving out, this is actually a smart thing to do. It creates a lot of clarity around land you don't really foresee having a lot to do with. And so, yeah, it's a smart deal when I look at it. So I'm absolutely supportive of the proposal.
Councilor Zelenka.
So I had a similar question to Councilor Clark, which is what happens in the next urban growth boundary expansion. So you said that because the land use designations are the same in the comprehensive plan that the county has and the metro plan, right now the land use designation, nothing would happen as a result of this change.
Correct.
But what happens is, in those areas, the sole authority over the land use designation for those rests only with Lane County, and in the circumstance of the city of Eugene, we would no longer have any say in if they chose to redesignate any of those lands.
That is correct.
It would just be with the Lane County Commissioners.
That is correct, although I will say that it is more difficult to designate lands in the county, particularly if they're resource lands with high-value soils.
Right, and it should be, but it's possible. So what's the rationale for the metro plan boundary as compared to the urban growth boundary?
You know, in my research, I've never found anything that said this is why it was drawn here. There's just not a good record. Maybe somebody, I don't know if anybody else has an idea.
Lynn probably knows.
Yeah.
Mayor Piercy, Councilor Zelenka, that was the result of a very creative exercise with a very wide pen. And as you will recall, this occurred before Senate Bill 100 was passed, before there were land use development rules. The logic, I'm sure, was inimitable clear to those who did it at the time. At the time, with the possible exception of Mr. Mott, I don't believe there is anyone here who knows that.
Yeah, you're right. I was in grade school.
And in terms of the urban growth boundary, those are intended to be large enough to accommodate our 20 years of land supply.
Right, but my guess after being around this for a while is that the Metro Plan boundary was those areas outside the urban growth boundary that would be directly impacted by or potentially urbanizable lands in the future, impacted by our city services, our transportation, our development needs. And so the reason for the Metro Plan boundary was to create this kind of no man's land that was potentially the area that could become inside the UGB. And therefore cities would want, and the reason both jurisdictions had authority there was because then the city would have a vested interest in making sure in the future, should they ever become inside the urban growth boundary where they would have jurisdiction, that they had a say in how those lands got developed. And that was the whole point of both jurisdictions being involved in that in that decision-making process. So, question, Lisa. So after this decision, what is the rule, and say it happened in, hypothetically, in Eugene, what would be the role of the cities in land use decisions in those areas?
So on the Springfield side, if this is approved,
Well, Mayor Piercy, Councilor Zelenka, if this is approved and if future land use actions occur, pursuant to the intergovernmental agreement, the city of Springfield would be notified of any land use action. And if, in its opinion, that land use action affected either the inventory of the Gold 5 water resource or the protection of that Gold 5 water resource under a wellhead protection plan adopted by the county, then the city would have decisional authority with the county with respect to that application. Absent that, if it is an application under the rural comp plan that does not affect those particular issues, then the city would have the same powers as any other citizen or property owner.
Which is commenting on it.
Yes, Councilor.
So, so what was the problem that the county was trying to solve by doing this?
it was my understanding, this has been going on for a long time, but it was my understanding that they wanted to have full jurisdictional autonomy in these areas.
Mayor Piercy, Councilor Zelenka, it is my understanding that the commissioners who initiated this conversation, at least some of them, were concerned about the lack of clarity of representation of the citizens who lived there. That is, they were not residents of the city, yet what the city did had the power to affect them because any land use change would involve the city. And this led to additional confusion. It led to, because of the way the Metro Plan was developed, situations like Mrs. Robinson faces with respect to the distinction of what she can do with her property in the Metro Plan and the rural, what it is within the rural comp plan, and to minimize these confusing circumstances and to allow for, if the property is outside of the urban growth boundary, it is basically part of the rural comp plan, and the county has the jurisdictional authority, and if it's inside the urban growth boundary, then it's joint authority. That was to simplify, and at least that's the best explanation I have been provided with the county's reasons. I do not pretend to know the mind of any county commissioner.
Okay. Sounds surprisingly similar to River Road, Santa Clara, and the hodgepodge of county and city lands that are out there, but I guess that's a different issue, I suppose. Yeah. So, in essence, the city gives up all its jurisdiction over land use, transportation, utilities, and regional planning, basically, with this change.
In Springfield case, they do have the IGA that...
But only as it relates to water.
Correct.
Site, the water wells, right?
Correct.
Right. So, yeah, I've always thought regional planning was actually a good idea, and I didn't support 3337. And in this case, I think we have the Eugene Airport in that area, Spencer Butte Park you mentioned, the LCC, which is a regional and potentially urbanizable area. All of these things are within that area for our side of it. I think that's going to be a very, very different conversation when we get to that. And I think regional planning was actually a good thing. And this seems to put another nail in the regional planning's coffin, though.
I'm inclined to have those concerns that you have, Councilor Zelenka, but I really want to say that with the split of the urban growth boundary, I have felt some of the tension relax and people be able to work with each other more openly and more thoroughly. And so I don't know if, I mean, I can't speak for the future. I can't speak for different people, but my experience thus far has been we've been able to spend less time trying to fend each other off and more time figuring out how we can work together for the benefit of our entire region. So I can see through both windows in this case.
Mayor.
Yes.
Just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that a 6-0 vote was ambiguous on the Springfield side. I'd be happy to accommodate them.
Yep.
Mayor Piercy, if I may, with respect to your comment, my conversations with the Springfield Council clearly lead me to the conclusion that they have as much interest in regional planning today as they had in the past. And in fact, I have been directed to continue to work with your staff with respect to continuation and continued work to make sure that a future Metro Plan remains effective and a viable means of regional planning in this area.
I appreciate that very much.
This just fits our rhythm better.
I know. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you so much, and appreciate the information.
No. Info only.